Hello Reds and welcome to the 100% United season review, part 3. Today we're bringing you positives, negatives and end of year awards. I'm your host TC and I'm joined again by my co-host Scott. Hello mate.
Hello mate.
In parts 1 and 2 we looked firstly at the downfall of Jose Mourinho and then discussed the wonderful run after Ole Gunnar Solskjaer replaced the Portuguese. If you haven't listened to parts 1 and 2 yet, jump back and listen to them now before you get stuck into part 3. So Manchester United were buoyant again, that triumph in Paris leading to calls from inside and outside Old Trafford for Ole to be handed the United manager's job on a full-time basis. In hindsight, Scott, we all went a bit overboard, didn't we?
Yeah, I think maybe hindsight shows us that, but it just shows me that we can never make the right decision, right? That there's always people on either side that, at the time everyone was saying, what else has Ole got to do to be able to get the full-time job? Then it seemed that as soon as it happened, it was, well, why have we done it now? Why didn't we just wait? It seemed that we could never get it right.
You're exactly right, mate. I mean, we're still the biggest story in town, and the press, they do go wildly one way and wildly the other way when it comes to Manchester United. But there was across the board, people were calling for us to appoint Ole and saying that we'd be making a big mistake if we didn't put him in full-time charge. In hindsight, like I say, we didn't need to make the decision then. We could have held strong, but like you say, we're stuck between a rock and a hard place, aren't we? The press, they go all in one way or all in the other way.
Absolutely, we can never make the right call.
Yeah, and it does show when you see other teams winning trophies, massive trophies, and then the headlines the next day are, Paul Pogba goes into training with a grump on his face or something like that, and one of our rivals has won the trophy the day before. It's incredible stuff, really.
Yeah, things don't make sense, do they? But yeah, we've just got to run with it because it's not going to change.
Yes, mate, and we'll get into that later in the show. But that is one of the massive problems at Old Trafford these days. We've got the fan base, we've got the exposure of a giant club, but we haven't got the players or the attitude within the squad that can handle it.
No, we're always the centre of attention, and these players maybe can't deal with the pressure of having a magnifying glass on them at all times of the day.
Yes, mate, absolutely. And it makes it hard because obviously we're now in a position where we've got one hand tied behind our backs with not having Champions League football, but the kind of players we need to get in who can handle that kind of pressure, who do have the ability to play for Manchester United, it becomes that much harder, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm not sure I necessarily agree with that. As we know, last time we didn't have Champions League football, we broke the world transfer record. We signed Zlatan Ibrahimovic and got the Player of the Year from Germany, all in the same summer. So I'm not sure I necessarily agree with that. I think that regardless of whether we're in the Champions League or not, we are still the biggest draw in town and players still want to come to us.
I agree, players definitely do want to come to us. I guess my worry is the players that do come to us in general are players who've got dollar signs in their eyeballs rather than players who really, really want to make it big in the football world. Obviously, Zlatan came over and brought a great attitude with him. But yeah, sure, we'll be able to get people in. It's just, as I say, people who want to be at the top of the game, fighting for trophies. At the moment, you'd have to say that United's not first choice.
Yeah, you might be right, but there is, I'm pretty sure, some appeal in wanting to be here when we're riding the wave going back up again, of being part of a team that brings success back to this enormous club. And some players want to be part of that instead of just coming when it's already happened.
That's a great point, mate. And I do always say that you don't join a club to win trophies, you join a club to help them win trophies. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you're right there, that the kind of people who come in, if you're one of the men who reinstates United to the top of the football world, you're going to be remembered forever. So I know there's been rumours maybe certain players, Matthias de Ligt, possibly is excited about the possibility of being one of those players. So you just never know in football. It can change overnight. Couple of signings here or there, as we'll get into later. But as we know, mate, we went on that mad run under Ole. It was unprecedented, the greatest start for any manager in the history of Manchester United. And as we say, the calls got louder and louder for us to appoint him on a permanent basis. We ended up doing it after a couple of losses. As you say, we were stuck between a rock and a hard place. If you could go back now, would you change that decision?
Well, I think you'd have to, given we know what happened afterwards. But, it's a really tough call. Maybe, but, who knows? I think other factors as well played into our real drop-off in form. It wasn't all his fault. I don't think as soon as he got the job, he stopped trying or anything like that. I think that it wasn't all his fault. And maybe regardless when we appointed him wasn't necessarily correlative to when things did start going wrong.
You're right. We dropped off just before we appointed him. You're right. It wasn't a direct correlation. The other thing I would say is that we went from being the team that ran pretty much the least in the whole league to the team that ran the most in the whole league almost overnight. After a good few games, about 16 games, you're going to get a drop-off. You're going to get players who are feeling that. You know, they've been running way, way more every game. I know we started picking up a few hamstring injuries and stuff. Jesse Lingard went down. Maybe that had a big part to play as well, Scott.
I definitely agree. I think that we saw from that Liverpool game that when we lost 3 players, Rashford got injured as well, we lost all those players in the first half, that maybe Ole questioned his training tactics and maybe took the foot off the gas a little bit then. I will have to say that, I think that when he first started, no one was expecting us to go on this mad run. When the draw happened and we got PSG, no one was expecting us to win it. And then suddenly everyone's expectations change. The first time we went to the Emirates this season, the FA Cup, no one was expecting us to win. We went there, we absolutely bossed it. We won the game comfortably. And then by the time, a month later, we go there again and everyone's expecting us to win. The expectations had completely changed, and I think that's got something to do with it as well.
You're right, mate, and that was a big turning point, that first Arsenal game. Obviously, the first loss went down 2-0. There was a monster chance for Romelu Lukaku. He obviously went into the match on scintillating form, but that was a massive chance he missed into the ground and up onto the bar.
Yeah, it really was, and it really hurt his confidence for weeks and weeks after that maybe even he never really got back from it.
Yeah, this is the problem I've got with Big Rom. He does go on amazingly good runs, but then he goes on equally bad runs straight after. Now, don't get me wrong, we've seen Andy Cole, Ruud van Nistelrooy, Cristiano Ronaldo, all our great goal scorers, Wayne Rooney. We've seen them go through droughts before. We've seen it happen, but they're few and far between. Lukaku seems to go on a goal spree and then a goal drought, a goal spree and then a goal drought. And just when you start trusting him, then the goals disappear from his game. And it's a real problem.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that he's even proved himself by disabling comments on his Instagrams, that he listens to a lot of these criticisms and gets affected by it.
Yeah, I agree, mate. And then obviously we went back-to-back losses where it went down to Wolves. 2-1 again. It was a game where we didn't play so badly, but it was a goal that changed everything. And we just fell apart after conceding again, didn't we?
Yeah, I actually have to disagree there, TC. I thought we were pretty poor the whole game. It was a huge moment for Pogba to get given the captain's armband, and he was massively underwhelming. Seemed like he was just a pedestrian for a lot of the game.
Yeah.
But I have to disagree. I don't think we were very good that day. I think, if anything, when we played him a couple of weeks later, we maybe bucked our ideas up a little bit. But I think we were pretty poor that day, mate.
Yeah, as I say, mate, I mean, the form of the team did go down incrementally. And as I say, I mean, I thought in the Arsenal game, the Wolves game, we weren't so bad. We obviously scraped through against Watford, 2-1 at home, and then went to Wolves again and again lost by the same scoreline. And that was a very, very worrying sign, wasn't it, pal?
It was, and let's not forget that one of the things I factor our massive downturn in form to was when Zidane started commenting about Paul Pogba, and that was right after the Wolves game in the FA Cup, around the second week of March. And I think that's when Pogba's head got turned, and he went from being the absolute fulcrum to everything we did good in our play to just being a passenger in everything we did.
Yeah, and then obviously we had that massive Champions League night following Paris. We had Barcelona, came to Old Trafford. We didn't embarrass ourselves that night, mate, did we? 0-1 loss to Barcelona. But we left ourselves, obviously, with what looked like a mountain to climb.
Yeah, and it just wasn't a great performance again. Didn't have any shots on target. 33% possession. We were actually all right first 10 minutes, and then everything just went to pot after we conceded a goal.
Yeah.
And in knockout competitions, that's just not how it's supposed to be, right?
No, it's not. It's not at all. But Messi did struggle in one of the big English stadiums again. It's a bit of a habit from him, actually. Old Trafford, as we know, he struggled at Anfield too. In the really, really big English arenas, obviously at Wembley in the final he did all right, but again he was underwhelming in England.
Yeah, I think Chris Smalling's challenge had something to do with that. Didn't he break his nose or fractured his part of his nose and wasn't really at the races after that? But even without their best player, they still completely outplayed us, and again we were just, it seemed like we were a mile off, mate.
Yes, mate, it was getting worse and worse, and obviously it culminated. The season absolutely fell apart in that desperate week where we went down 3-0 to Barcelona in the new camp. Messi obviously rammed the words I just said down my throat and scored early, and then David De Gea made the biggest mistake I've ever seen him make in a Manchester United shirt. It just looked like a schoolboy error on the biggest stage of all. A really, really disappointing night for Dave.
It was. He had made that mistake at Arsenal a few weeks earlier where he got wrong-footed by
Xhaka.
By a shot that was pretty poor, but we sat there and we defended him for a few weeks, or at least the most staunch supporters try to defend that. And then that second goal at Barcelona was pretty indefensible. And I think everybody who thought he was just going through a blip in confidence started to really see that this was maybe a bigger issue.
Yes, mate. I must say, when it went in, it all came together. You look at it, if we sell him now, we're going to sell him for less than we were going to sell him for, which is obviously a negative. If we keep him now, we're keeping a keeper who is a lesser keeper than we had at the start of the season, unfortunately. That's what's happened. And if we keep him, keeping a keeper who, on the biggest stage of all, in his biggest matches, there is a little bit of history of mistakes.
Yeah, there's an element of doubt in his mind now. And a keeper who's got doubt, who doubts his own abilities is one of the worst keepers you can have.
Yes, mate. And I did say that I would have dropped him after the Barcelona game for the simple fact that people are going to be pulling the trigger from all angles and all ranges, and it's going to be sort of a recurring nightmare. We went to Everton on the Sunday with a real chance to bounce back. There was apologies from the players after the Barcelona game, verbal apologies again, and just the performance at Everton was probably, I would say, the low point of the season. 4-0 at Goodison Park, just incredibly bad.
Yeah, one of the worst performances I've ever seen our Reds have. And not just the result or the manner of the defeat, but just in some of the attitude of the players. There was some finger pointing. A lot of players seemed like they had given up when we went just 2-0 down. I mean, the second half was dismal. Absolutely dismal.
Yeah, some of the worst effort I've ever seen from a United team. Mm-hmm. And you say from our Reds, but we didn't even wear red, did we, against the Blues of Everton? We wore a pink shirt, which added to the comic value of the whole blooming thing, if we're honest. Yeah. City came to Old Trafford, obviously chasing the title. 2-0 victors. We all know what happened. Another subpar performance, really. We managed not to totally embarrass ourselves. And Chelsea came to Old Trafford, and we knew that a win would really catapult us into those Champions League spots and put us in pole position. Again, took the lead.
Yes.
But David there
started well, had a really good half. Just that our Achilles heel this year was, as soon as we conceded a goal, we just lost focus and couldn't recover.
Yeah, it was awful keeping, really. Yeah. Gifting Alonso the equaliser. And then we huffed and we puffed and we couldn't get the 3 points. And we left ourselves with a tricky route to get back in the Champions League. But, mate, the last 2 games of the season really summed it up for us Reds. We went to Huddersfield knowing we needed to win. To have a good chance, actually, of getting into the Champions League. We drew 1-1 away to Huddersfield. And then the last game of the season, Cardiff came to Old Trafford and we lost 2-0 to Cardiff. Both teams already relegated. Just really, really shocking stuff from a group of players who you have to say a large percentage of them are down tools.
Yeah, they'd all gone on holiday. It seemed after that Chelsea game, which, again, we felt that whoever won that game would have the best chance of finishing 4th. And they didn't even need to win it, and they still came 3rd. Like, it was so achievable to get in that top 4. And you'd think after the disappointment of getting thrown out of the Champions League like we did and getting knocked out the FA Cup like we did, you'd think that they would have at least tried to muster the effort to just save their own face. But it just didn't seem like anyone was interested anymore. And it was tough, mate. It was really tough.
And as we subsequently learned, that they were playing for their cash as well. So they weren't just playing for pride. Mm-hmm. They were paying to keep the wages they're on and not have them cut by 25%. Mm-hmm. So even as you mentioned a few weeks ago, pal, they couldn't even play for the money.
Yeah, that's the pretty unforgivable thing, right? That we like to blame players these days for being greedy and for being mercenaries, but it wasn't even that. As I say, they were all on holiday and seemed like they all had better things to do.
Yes, mate. So a tragic season for United again. Started awfully. We had that honeymoon period with Ole in the middle, in which we had a magical ride, let's be fair. And then the end of the season, it all went to pot. Let's do some end of season awards, Scott. Not the fanfare we were hoping for, but let's start off with the player of the season. I know the fans and the players gave their award to Luke Shaw. We didn't really argue with it at the time, although I did notice a week or two ago, you said that, just in passing, that Lindelof was our best defender this year. So what do you think, pal? Was Luke Shaw our best defender or Victor Lindelof? What do you think?
I think Lindelof deserves to be our player of the year. Came on leaps and bounds from how he played before, and I would think that we would have actually been in a worse position without his crucial defending this season. Luke Shaw was great, let's be honest. Talk about coming a long way from where he was a few years ago, but I would have given it to Lindelof. What about yourself?
I actually would give it to Lindelof too, pal.
Yeah.
Especially as when the team started really showing a lack of leadership, he seemed to up his leadership, which to me is a good sign. He obviously didn't have a great start at the club, but I thought as a central defender, he had a higher level of performance than Luke Shaw did as a fullback, personally. That's not taking away anything from Luke Shaw. I just think as a fullback, you've got to post sort of higher numbers to be looking for a Player of the Year awards, personally.
It's one of those, it's really tough to single someone out and give it to someone because everybody had a time this season where they played pretty poor themselves.
Yes, and I mean, let's caveat that with saying that Lindelof, with that performance, on a normal United year, doesn't even get in the top 10. So that's the truth of the matter. So Women's Player of the Year, Scott. Personally, I'm going for Katie Zellem.
Yeah, I'd go Katie Zellem as well.
With United since she was 8 years old. So like the first team, the women's team, they've got a good few women there who have played for the youth team, gone elsewhere and come back. So that tradition of United using the youth to bolster the first team is spreading into the women's game too.
Yeah, absolutely. Katie Zellem was definitely the Player of the Year in the women's team.
Yeah, and just touching on youth turning to first team, Young Player of the Year this year, pal?
I think Scott McTominay's got to be the most deserved of it, right? His performance in Paris and in the first leg against Barcelona was definitely warranted. Had a couple really nice goals as well. Let's hope he can really kick on.
100% agree with you, pal. Absolutely. Great stuff from Scott. Goal of the season, mate. Did you agree with Andreas Pereira getting it at the official awards?
I thought it really was a great goal. It was really great to see him score it. I would actually go for Ollie's first game in charge, the Anthony Martial goal. Beautiful link-up play with everyone, and it was really a sign of things to come. It was really a classic United goal. Yeah, that would have been mine. What about yours? Pereira for you?
No, I enjoyed Pereira's, but and I'm a man who does like a long ranger.
Yeah.
I do like a long ranger more than an individual goal normally. But the Martial goal at Fulham for me, grabbed it.
What a goal!
Maybe sort of jigged my memory of one of my favourite United goals, Ronaldo, when he danced down that wing at Fulham and catapulted us towards the title back in 2007. It had shades of that. It's funny, isn't it? Martial divides opinions, and we've certainly been critical of his attitude, but then two of his goals win our goal of the season. So it just shows again, he's the same as the Pogba camp.
Yeah.
And Martial, if he could just get his attitude right, and I wish he would. You know, I would love him to turn around and turn it on, and Pogba to turn it on, and us never to have to mention this again. But he has all the tools. He's such a good player when he wants to be.
Yeah, I think that's the most frustrating thing, is that you can see what they can do on their day, that when they don't apply themselves the way that we'd want them to, it's the most frustrating thing, isn't it?
It really is, pal.
You can forgive a player for not being good enough, but you can't forgive them for not trying hard enough.
No. Best song of the season, mate? I think there's only one winner, isn't there?
Yeah, there's no question, mate.
Only criticism, I suppose, is that maybe we've had it on repeat for too long. Match of the season, mate. Another blooming no-brainer.
Yeah. PSG away.
Fantastic. I can't complain about that. Yeah. What about your favourite player this season, mate? Not necessarily the player that's played the best, but the player that has exemplified that 100% United spirit.
I think I'll maybe go with Lindelof again.
Nice.
I think he really asserted himself in great situations, and being centre-back for United is a really pressured environment, a really critical job to have, as we can see from the amount of flack that Smalling and Jones get. I think he really tried his best, and he exceeded a lot of my expectations of him, which is always a good thing. So what about yours?
Yeah, my favourite player this year, I'd have to go to Scott McTominay.
All right.
For me, he's mirrored the emotions I've felt, the joys, the ups, the downs. It seems like he is a fan on the field, and for me, that's magic.
Yeah, good call.
And what about the club team of the year, mate? From all the club teams, from first team to women's team, all the way through the reserves and the age groups. Who wins it for you this year, pal?
I think I'd probably have to say the women's team, mate. They seem like they bossed every game and won promotion pretty easily. And let's see how they do in the top flight next year.
Yes, mate, I totally agree. They're my team of the year too. In terms of performance, result, and attitude as well. They've showed a great attitude, great team spirit.
Yeah.
Always have smiles on their faces. That's the kind of spirit I like, and it's the United spirit as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, fantastic stuff.
Cool.
Right, mate. Let's move on to the positives, if we can, from this season. In terms of what we got to grab onto, to look forward to, and which moments of the season gave us hope for the future. I mean, I'll kick off with we finally got a manager at the helm that understands the club. He's got a strong connection, and he's obviously got a love for the club as well. We all as fans always say, sometimes fans say they know better. And we've actually got a fan in there now and showing it's not as easy as we sometimes think from the outside.
Yeah, he's definitely someone who gets our club, and that's what we want the most, right? As we've said to each other a lot over the years, we don't necessarily need the most successful manager on paper. We just need someone who understands the entire club, because the club is bigger than the manager, and I think we've definitely got that now. But I am glad to see him surrounding himself with a bit of tactical nous, because I think that's maybe his one possible weakness, is that he doesn't quite have the tactical nous. But I think that him with Mike Phelan and Michael Carrick, I think we can definitely go places. We just need players with the right attitude to help them get there.
Yes, mate, and I'd say that's definitely another plus point, is Mike Phelan returning to the club. One negative, though, we haven't seen much of his shorts, have we?
No, definitely haven't. What good's Mike Phelan without a pair of shorts on?
Yeah, I think it's funny, isn't it? We've been begging for them. Everyone's asking where's his shorts, and he's kind of playing hard to get. It's very weird.
Yeah.
Maybe he hasn't shaved his legs.
That's what we're all looking forward to for the summer tour, right? Down under, we'll see if we can get some shorts on Mike.
100% guaranteed, pal. Don't you worry about that. Another massive plus point, mate, as we mentioned, Scott McTominay emerging, Mason Greenwood and Tahith Chong making their first team bows, and also Axel Tuanzebe having a really, really good year at Villa and maybe helping them get promotion. He's certainly in the playoff final. So the youth tradition carries on. Let's mention Dean Henderson at Sheffield United as well.
Absolutely.
The goalkeeper who's been pulling up trees. So that's a good group of players who are at the club for years to come.
Yeah. Definitely. I think we're going to have a big decision in the very near future about goalkeepers, and Dean Henderson isn't a player that we should overlook. I think he's done really well. He's another United born and bred lad, and maybe it's time for him to step up.
Maybe. Should we touch on the keepers now, Scott? Obviously, we're hearing rumours that David De Gea has turned down the final offer from Manchester United, and we're seriously considering moving him on this summer. PSG readying a £60 million bid. What are your thoughts on that at this point in time, pal?
I'll be a lot less disappointed than I would have been this time last year if we were to let him go.
Yeah.
I think he's got some serious doubts in his own abilities nowadays, and his performances match that. I think we've got a fantastic understudy already in Sergio Romero. I think we've got Joel Pereira as well coming back from loan. Dean Henderson, as we just said, that we're actually not that bad in the goalkeeping department. I'd like us to focus our attentions on getting some goals up front than worrying about replacing a goalkeeper.
Yeah, I guess my worry is that we've got, say, our most productive outfield player, Paul Pogba, who, for one reason or another, we might need to replace. We've got our player of the year from 2017, who we need to replace. We know that. The players who are potentially leaving because they haven't performed, your Sanchez's, Matic's, that's experience that we need to replace. And then if we're going to sell the goalkeeper who's been the number one goalkeeper in the world for the last few years, and then replace him with someone who is undoubtedly not the best keeper in the world, in Sergio Romero, he's a very good keeper, but you definitely look across to City, you look across to Liverpool, and then suddenly the one thing we had on them, which was a better keeper, suddenly, Alisson and Ederson, they're a level above Romero. So again, the club, we're diluting each area of the club, and before we know it, I used to laugh when Jordan Henderson used to captain Liverpool. I used to think that was hilarious. Well, the joke's on me now because we've got Ashley Young as skipper. So, I'm just worried that each area of the squad gets downgraded, and then you're looking at replacing a keeper, a centre-back, a central midfielder, a captain, a striker. I don't think we have the squad to be doing it.
No, I'd agree with you. We've, as I say, we've got other areas we need to strengthen, but I don't think we can sit here anymore.
Can I just interject a sec, pal? Because let's mess around here. The bigger problem here is that we shouldn't be negotiating with David De Gea when he's got 1 year left in his contract, should we?
Definitely not.
This should have been wrapped up before. This shouldn't be an issue where we've got a gun to our head with a summer where his contract's up in 2020.
But I think this actually comes down to the contract they've given Alexis Sanchez. If people are looking around thinking, God, this guy who doesn't apply himself the way he should, he's on 500 grand a week. Why aren't I on that level? It's one of those terrible things about giving free transfer players massive contracts is that come a year later, everyone forgets the fact that we didn't pay anything for him and they just think about his contract now.
That's a fantastic point, Scott. An absolutely fantastic point. And it's spot on too. It's caused absolute havoc. It may have cost us Herrera. It may have cost us David De Gea too. Let's see if we can get a few more positives out of this season, Scott. Yeah. We quickly got into negatives there, didn't we? Yeah. Luke Shaw and Victor Lindelof, the pair of them we've already discussed them, but they're definitely a plus point from this season.
Definitely, and Diogo Dalot. Let's not forget we've got a right back that he could be our right back for 10 years.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of Dalot. Yeah. Massive moment in the season. Sir Alex Ferguson returning to Old Trafford after his scare, and that was another great moment. I know we mentioned it before, but that's a massive plus point from the season. Another thing, mate, a bit from left field. I like to look on the positive side of things. But we should remember as United fans how quickly football can change. Don't forget, last season, Liverpool finished behind us.
Mm-hmm.
Now everyone's saying that it will take us years to catch Liverpool. We're miles behind Liverpool. We're miles behind City. That's fine, but we did finish second last year and Liverpool did finish behind us.
Absolutely. And look, just a couple of years ago, how Leicester were dead and buried and managed to avoid relegation, and the next year they won the league. And you couldn't say that they had a title-winning squad.
No. And you know what, mate? 2017 Europa League final. We played Ajax, we bossed them, men against boys. And now, a couple of years later, Ajax are looking like the real deal. They've got players who they're selling for all kinds of cash and they got to semi-finals of the Champions League. Spurs, just a few months ago, my cousin's a Spurs fan and I was having to gee him up for the City game saying, you can do it, you'll be all right. And he said, we don't have a chance, we're useless, mate. Mm-hmm. They thought their season was over and now they're in the Champions League final. Yeah. As we mentioned last week on the podcast, we went to Chelsea. And they were singing Sarri out, you're getting sacked in the morning. The Chelsea fans, their own manager, calling for Frank Lampard to come in. They end up finishing third in the league. So football can change very, very quickly for very, very many different reasons. Yeah. I think as United fans, we've become a bit sort of reactionary. When the team does well, we go bananas. When the team does badly, we all fall apart. We're all a bit hysterical. And I think we need to sort of, as fans, like we demand 100% of the players, I believe we need to sort of get back to sort of making Old Trafford a cauldron, making it so that when the match is on, we support the team fully, 100%. And yeah, if we're going to have a moan, we have a moan afterwards. But I do think it's one thing that Klopp says. I'm not a massive fan of Klopp at all. How could I be? But he did say that one of the things that he aimed for when he went into Liverpool is to energise the crowd, to unite the crowd with the manager and the team. And I have to say, I know he sounds cheesy, but he is right. And I do think that's part of the reason why we had such an upturn in form when Ole took the wheel, because the players, the fans, the management, we really did feel united again.
Yeah, I definitely agree. But I think that there are different standards, right? There are different expectations on Klopp himself, that if we manage to, here's an example. The end of January when we played Burnley at home and went 2-0 down, came back to win 2-2. If Solskjaer had come onto the pitch afterwards and taken everyone to the Stretford end and we're all clapping everybody for drawing at home to Burnley, like he did when they drew at home to West Brom a few years ago,
I know where you go.
We would be absolutely ribbed and taken to the cleaners for it.
Yeah.
And he does it, and it's this, he's energising everybody and he's really being part of the crowd and blah, blah, blah. It's just a completely different kettle of fish, mate.
You're right.
I think if he pulled those antics at us, that we'd be a laughing stock.
You're right, mate. You are spot on. The standards at United across the board are way higher. And look, that moment was absolutely cringeworthy from Klopp when he did that.
Awful.
And, he's singing after they lost the European Cup final.
Yeah,
that was embarrassing too.
Yeah.
But in terms of, as an ideal, I do think that's something. Just imagine Old Trafford every single week, no matter what, was just banging from first whistle to last whistle every single week. You can't tell me we wouldn't play better.
Oh, I definitely agree. I absolutely agree with you. And I wish it's something that we could just snap our fingers and do. It's going to take a lot more than that. The South, the North and the East stands definitely aren't as loud as the Stretford end. And it's obviously that we'd something we'd love to change.
Yes, absolutely, mate. Now let's look at, should we go from the positives into the negatives on Paul Pogba? Yeah. Because he's kind of the perfect man to transition from the positives to the negatives. Because you know what, pal, if we were giving a United player of the season on just output, if at the start of the season we had no expectations of any of the players, we knew none of their histories, they were all just pixelated players, then Paul Pogba would be player of the season by a mile.
100%. If you said at the beginning of the season Pogba's going to score 16 goals and 14 assists or whatever it was, you'd think, well, he's going to be player of the year undoubtedly then, right?
And, pass completion 83%. And this is a guy who tries some outrageous passes. He doesn't keep it simple all the time. 2.5 shots per game, 1.6 key passes a game. It's a good return. It really is. Being dispossessed 2.3 times per game is not great. Obviously, that's the part of his game that's really cost us. But Paul Pogba, like I say, in terms of output, he was our best player by quite a mile, really. Now we're hearing that Ole's going to offer him a captaincy role. Some people are saying it's the captaincy position. From what I gather, it's a captaincy role. So apparently Ashley Young's going to be offered the club captaincy. And then Paul Pogba would be realistically captaining the team on a regular basis because Ashley Young won't be starting very often. What do you think of that, pal? I mean, I'm between two camps here. I don't believe the United captaincy should be used as something to entice someone to stay at Old Trafford, but we have to accept that we have fallen a bit as a club. we don't have any standout captain candidates. And if it did mean us keeping a player who has the potential to fire us back to the top of the game, maybe it's the right move.
Listen, I'm a huge Paul Pogba fan. I think that he is, on his day, the best midfielder in the world by an absolute mile. But when he doesn't assert himself, he's one of the worst players you can possibly see. And the last couple of months, mate, you can't question whether he wants to be in a United shirt anymore. And as you say, I don't want to just offer someone the captaincy as a token to try and get them to stay. And I don't want Pogba to stay if he doesn't want to stay anymore, because it's just the worst example for everybody else. And it's a huge catalyst to our downfall.
Yeah, mate, probably a defining decision for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, I would have thought. Again, like you alluded to earlier with us when we make decisions, we sell him and everyone will say, oh, you've sold the world record signing. He failed, another flop. He'll be brilliant at Real Madrid. And you watch, honestly, they'll be lauding him at Real Madrid for the first few months before he downs tools again. Mm-hmm. And then if we keep him, then they'll say, oh, you're desperate. You handed him the captaincy armband, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, you're right, mate. But I think me and you stopped listening to the press a long time ago, didn't we?
Yeah, you're right. Whatever decision we make, it'll be the wrong one in the eyes of the English press.
Yeah. So now let's get on to the negatives, mate. I mean, we could be here all day. Yeah. We have gone through match to match, obviously. So in terms of negatives, I'd rather focus on things that we can pinpoint and maybe look to improve, or things that, you know, are so blatantly obvious that they need to be mentioned. One thing I will say about this group of players, they have gone on great runs under Louis van Gaal. They went on a great run under Mourinho as well, and now Solskjaer too. So it's quite strange, isn't it, the way they have shown the ability to go on these runs, and it's almost like when they get their feet under the table, they get comfortable with a manager, then the tools go down.
Yeah, or the first sign of criticism, that they start believing it, and their performances are warranted to the criticism that they've already read.
Yeah, and one thing obviously has been highlighted is that the structure of the club is not very functional. We've been discussing a director of football coming in above Ole. We don't seem to be in too much of a rush to do it. There's been names floated, obviously ex-players. Edwin van der Sar's been put in there. Peter Schmeichel's been in there too. Obviously, we know Petr Cech's taken over as Chelsea sporting director. Keeper's all the rage at the moment. Darren Fletcher mentioned too. Mike Fillion's obviously been appointed assistant manager on a full-time basis. What do you think, mate? Are we going to get a director of football, or are we going to go into next season without one? Because I kind of think we won't.
I think we need one, because I don't think we can keep having Ed Woodward make these football-based decisions. We need someone who's got more of a football background in order to make these decisions, take some of the responsibility away from him, because lest we forget, he's the one that gets 90% of the criticism when things go bad, even though he's got nothing to do with things that happen on the pitch.
Yeah, as we said, the standards are so much higher than the quality right now.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking the other day, actually, mate, that, you know, Sir Alex Ferguson, it's almost like he created a monster so powerful, so unstoppable, that no one else can control her.
Yeah.
It's just such a behemoth of a club. And he knew every nook and cranny. He knew exactly how to work it. But now with him gone, it's almost like there's just no one is strong enough to take those controls.
No, I agree. And I think it was that way even before, mate. I remember when we first won the league back in 93, that everyone was going crazy saying, can't believe it's been 26 years and 26 years this and 26 years that. And now here we are. It's been, 29 years since Liverpool won it, and no one ever says anything about it.
Well, we do.
Well, we do, obviously, but you never hear it like we used to hear back in the day.
You're right, mate. We might finish sixth. We might be all over the place. We might be emotional wrecks, but we're still the biggest story in town.
And that'll go on forever, mate.
You know it will, buddy. And as fans, I think, you know, we've got to keep that at the front of our minds. We are the biggest club. We are the best club. And when we're behind the team, it makes it so much better club. These divides that have come in, these civil wars that have happened, it's not United. We really need to get back to the spirit of the club in the name, Manchester United.
Yeah, for sure.
So we finally come to the end of a bitterly disappointing year as United fans. Let's put this season behind us and get behind Ole to give him the best chance of succeeding at Manchester United. Thanks so much for joining us this season. It means the world to Scott and I. Remember to subscribe and like on your favourite app, and follow us on Instagram at United100podcast. We will be with you all summer, Reds, bringing you United flashback shows where we'll review classic matches, and we'll have loads of transfer mayhem too. Let's hope there are brighter days ahead for United fans everywhere. Thanks for joining me again, Scott.
Thank you, TC.
Cheerio, Reds.
Ta-ra.